So let's dive right into that. And let's start with this right here. Earlier, I had mentioned that a lot of you are going to think this sounds too good to be true. And what do we do when we hear something that's too good to be true? We ignore it, we walk away, we disregard it. Well, if this 200-year-old concept is too good to be true, then why is it that all the wealthiest people have used it? The Rockefellers, the Rothschilds, the Morgans, the Stanleys, Ray Kroc, Walt Disney, Joe Biden, McCain, and I could keep going on and on. And not only that, why is it that it's talked about in some of the most popular books by some of the most popular authors? Books like Second Chance from Robert Kiyosaki. This book talks all about this concept in it. How about this book? Tony Robbins, we all know the big guy, right? Money, Master the Game. Section 5.2 talks all about this concept. And Becoming Your Own Banker, which is the book that kind of began this whole journey for so many. And it was written by R. Nelson Nash. All of these books talk about this, as well as the book that I wrote with Brent Kessler, Mapping Out the Millionaire Mystery. This book also talks about it. And you're going to have the opportunity to get a copy of our book for free. But let me talk a little bit about this picture on the screen. What you're looking at here is a bicycle. But not just any bicycle, this is a backward bicycle. And many of you, when you were a kid, you all learned how to ride a bike, right? When you were young, your parents got you a bike, they put the training on, and you sat on that bike, grabbed the handlebars, and you pushed your foot down, and the bike went forward. You started to learn what you needed to do to make this bicycle work. When you turn the handlebars to the right, the bike went to the right. When you turn the handlebars to the left, the bike went to the left. You started learning this new technique, this new experience in your life, which was how to ride a bicycle. But then your parents did something cruel. They took the training wheels off. And when they took the training wheels off, you probably fell. You got bumps, bruises, scrapes. Some of you cried, but you know what you did? You didn't quit. You got back on that bicycle and you continued to learn how to ride it. Some of you went on to ride wheelies and do 360s, but all of you mastered the art of riding a bicycle, because you were taught how to ride that bicycle. But what would happen if the bike didn't work that way? What would happen if when you got on that bicycle and you turned the handlebars to the right, the bike went to the left? And when you turned the handlebars to the left, the bike went to the right. Could you ride the backward bicycle? Well, a lot of you would say yes. A lot of you would say, of course I could. But the answer is you could not. And if you think you could, watch the video on YouTube called The Backward Bicycle, and you will certainly see that you could not ride this bicycle. But it's interesting because when you learn something one way, it's very difficult to change that way of thinking. And the exact same thing is true for money. Since you were very little, you've been trained to think about money a specific way. But what would happen if I told you that what you were taught about money was wrong? It would be very difficult for you to change to this new way of thinking, just like it's going to be very difficult today for you to see how this works. But not just that, it's not impossible. It would not be impossible, and eventually you would learn how to ride this backward bicycle, just like eventually you will learn how money really works. If and only if you choose to change one thing. And let's get into that. First, let's talk about the mysteries of money. What is the definition of money? Many of you have a different perceived notion of what money really is, but the true definition of money is nothing more than money is a means of exchange. That is all that money is. It's a means of exchange. Money for food, food for money. Money for car, car for money. Money for house, house for money. It's nothing more than a means of exchange. And then if I were to ask you, what company uses compound interest? What would you say? Well, most of you would say, well, banks. Banks use compound interest. Some of you would say Wall Street, and someone else would have a different answer. But the answer is not one business in the world uses compound interest. But let's focus on banks because that's the most common answer. Banks do not use compound interest. Banks charge you compound interest, okay? Banks pay you compound interest, but they don't use it themselves. And to use this as an example, what if you took a $20 bill like the one I'm holding in my hand right here? And if you wrote your name on this $20 bill and you went into your local bank and you handed it to the teller and you said, excuse me, Mr. or Mrs. Teller, I would like you to put this $20 bill in the little box in the back with my name on it. Is that how banks work? No. The bill goes into motion immediately and it gets lent out in those little cubicles behind you. You see, there isn't a business in the world that uses compound interest, nor do banks. Banks keep money in motion, just like you should. But you've never been shown how to do that. You've been taught to park your money and leave it in someone else's control. But today that has to change, because if I ask you this question right here, are your dollars worth more today or in the future? Is this $20 worth more today or in the future? What would you say? Well, you would probably tell me that that dollar is worth the most today. At least that's what I would hope. And if you don't think that that's the case, then think about 20 years ago, how many candy bars you could have bought for $20. And the answer is a heck of a lot more than today. How about taxes? Do taxes go up or do they go down? And would you rather pay tax on the seed or the harvest? Let's talk about the first one. Do taxes go up or go down? Taxes almost always go up, right? Even if they don't go up, don't they just find more crap to tax us on? And wouldn't it make more sense to pay tax on the seed versus the harvest? The answer is yes. And I'm sure all of you are agreeing with that. However, you don't practice what you preach, because chances are all of you are using a 401k or putting money in a 401k or some type of employer-sponsored plan, an IRA, a 401k. And what you're actually doing is when you put money into that 401k, you are actually giving up today's dollar in exchange for weaker dollars later. You're actually compounding the tax because the tax is always going to be there. And when you pay the tax on the money someday later, 59 and a half or beyond, you're going to pay tax on a larger amount. You're not going to pay tax on the seed, because if you paid tax on the seed, you'd pay tax on the dollars today, not future higher dollars. So this is a funny thing, because what people have been taught to do is give up control of their money, just like I explained a second ago. We've literally been taught to do things with money that we would never, ever do with things that money buys. Let me give you an example. Would you ever go out and buy a loaf of bread from your local grocery store or bakery, bring that loaf of bread home, put it in the freezer, close the freezer door, and wait 5, 10, or 15 years, then come back, open the freezer door, take out that loaf of bread and look at it and say, yum? No, it would be freezer burned. You would never eat that loaf of bread. How about this? Would you ever go and buy a brand new car and wait 5, 10, or 15 years to drive that car? No, you would not. But that's exactly what you've been taught to do with your money. You've been taught to give up control of your good dollars today and exchange them for weaker, higher tax dollars later. And if you want to be good at money, then you need to start changing who's in control of that money. And let's say, I get this one all the time. Let's say you get a match on your 401k. People rationalize why they put money in their 401ks all the time. Oh, it's the tax deduction. You're paying tax on the harvest, not the seed, right? But the other thing that people will always tell me, yeah, but Chris, I get a match. Well, let's use that loaf of bread example. If I went to the store and I bought a loaf of bread, I put it in the freezer, and I came back 5, 10, or 15 years later, and I opened the freezer, and now I have 2 freezer burned loaves of bread. Would you be happier? No, exactly. The one thing that I know that most people, if I ask you what you know about your retirement account, I can tell you what you know. You know very little. You know whether you're maybe in a conservative, moderate, or high risk tolerance, and you certainly know that when you get the statement, your balance went up or down. But that is about all people know about their 401ks and retirement plans. And up until this point, you've been taught to just accept the traditional way of thinking about money. But to truly build generational wealth, you need to challenge those old concepts, and you need to understand how money really works.